let's move on to Trump. So, some more in the saga of the subpoenas, the investigations. What exactly these even concern? We still don't really know. Let's put this up there on the screen. The Justice Department has issued 40 subpoenas in the last week. Wow. This is on the January 6th inquiry. So if we're keeping track of our inquiries, we've got the Super PAC investigation, we've got the January 6th investigation, and we have the classified documents one. Now, we haven't had any real developments on that front. There's some special master wrangling. We'll bring you anything important if it does rise to that level. But these all actually come to even the level of seizing the phones of two Trump advisors, an escalating investigation, again, also ahead of the midterm elections. And these appear to involve what happened on January 6th. It's kind of interesting because this is probably the least noticed investigation. Let's get into it a little bit, which is that a criminal investigation is into the actions specifically which led to the riot at the Capitol on January 6th. The investigation, quote, has come into focus in recent days, even though it's been more overshadowed by the current classified documents one. Federal agents with court-authorized search warrants took the phones from two people, Boris Epstein, who was an in-house counsel who helped coordinate Mr. Trump's legal efforts, and Mike Roman, who was a campaign strategist, director of Election Day operations for the Trump campaign. Both Epstein and Roman were linked to a, quote, critical element of Trump's bid to hold on to power, and specifically for the fake elector scheme to try and appoint different electors in Pennsylvania and in other swing states where they had claimed the, quote, vote was rigged. So it's interesting here. What they're really saying is that the subpoenas rose to the level of outright seizing phones in two cases, but many other subpoenas to quote unquote Trump allies and other activists who were involved in the entire Stop the Steal effort who could face some serious criminal liability, not even necessarily on the investigation of like the riot at the Capitol, but it looks like the fake elector scheme is what they're zeroing in on, because that's what Georgia is also looking at. That's well, right. I don't really know what level that would rise though, Krystal. Would it just be defrauding the government or like conspiracy to, stop a government proceeding? Yeah. I think that's the charge that would make the most sense.
I think that's probably correct. Right. I think for seditious conspiracy, you need like plans to commit violent acts.
Yes.
And so it does seem like from the reporting, the fake electors investigation in D.C. and also the grand jury that's impaneled down in Fulton County, Georgia, are the two that are kind of the furthest along. But they also, the questions about his fundraising that we talked to you about yesterday, the Save America PAC that was started right after Election Day. And of course, they raised like hundreds of millions of dollars. Oh, we're going to stop the steal, whatever. And then they just gave it to their consultant friends and actually didn't spend that much of it. And now Republicans are begging Trump to pony some of that over to their struggling Senate candidates. But that investigation is tied in with the other January 6th investigations that are going on here in D.C. So these subpoenas could be related also to that fundraising. They say some of the latest, in fact, the New York Times does say some of the latest subpoenas focus on the activities of the Save America Political Action Committee, the main political fundraising conduit for Mr. Trump since he left office. One thing that was interesting about this is last week it kind of caught our attention that Steve Bannon was out claiming that, like, I think he said 36 Trump people had their houses raided. This may be what he was referring to, that there was a grain of truth here, not exactly houses raided, but subpoenas issued and some phones at least seized. So there was at least some there in terms of what he was saying. And it comes at a point where you're just inside, I think, of that 60-day window.
Yes.
Where typically the DOJ, their historic tendency is to try to not make any noticeable or public moves in investigations leading into the election. So that was one theory as to why there was such a huge rush with all of these dozens and dozens of subpoenas being issued in this week, is to try to get ahead of that deadline. That's part of the reporting from CNN, who also had some details on this story. Let's go ahead and put their tear sheet up on the screen. The way they describe it is their number's a little bit different. They say more than 30. I think New York Times said, close to 40. So we're somewhere in that Steve Bannon.
And Bannon said 35. It looks like he was right.
Yeah, so there you go. CNN says top officials from Trump's political fundraising and former campaign operation are among dozens of people who received grand jury subpoenas in recent days as the Justice Department intensifies its criminal investigation into January 6th. Among them are so they have a few different names than the New York Times had. They've got former Trump campaign manager Bill Stepien and Sean Dolman, who worked for Trump's 2020 presidential campaign as chief financial officer, which is interesting. And they point out this came just before the Justice Department begins its standard pre-election quiet period. That's that 60-day period before the midterm elections. They also had some details about the subpoenas, both CNN and New York Times, that they'd gotten their hands on at least one of these subpoenas. The one that CNN reviewed said they were broad in scope, seeking information on a range of issues, including the fake elector scheme, Trump's primary fundraising and political vehicle, Save America PAC, the organizing of the Trump rally on January 6th, and any communications with a broad list of people who worked to overturn the 2020 election results. So I guess my big takeaway with all of this continues to be that they are very active, they are very aggressive, and it's hard for me to believe at this point that they are going to decline to charge Trump with something in connection with something. Classified documents, January 6th. I just can't imagine that the government would be taking this type of publicly visible, very clear investigatory activities with all of these grand juries impaneled if they weren't planning on ultimately doing something.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think there's just no way that it wouldn't work this way, because it's like a war on literally all fronts, from the documents case to this one, to the subpoena, to the super PAC, to Georgia. Now it's seizing people's phones. Look, I mean, it's possible that it all comes out to nothing, but at the very least, somebody around him at the very, very highest level is getting charged.
Oh, a lot of these, listen, a lot of these people are gonna
whether they get
some serious legal
convicted
jeopardy,
and go to jail, I don't know, but
yeah,
it still sucks to get prosecuted. So, and that looks very likely if you're one of these folks.
Yeah, they don't have the deference that Trump has been afforded and will continue to be afforded as a former president. They don't get that elite circle protection. So a lot of people, in the crosshairs right now, so to speak. It's very dramatic days, very interesting. Again, this may be the last flurry of activity before the midterm elections, and we'll see what comes out after that. But again, I go back to this sense, which is just, as a layperson looking at this from the outside and considering the politics, which is definitely something that the DOJ and the Biden administration are considering. You can't put this much evidence and information of crimes into the public and then walk away from charging, because that creates its own set of political problems. Previously, when we didn't have all this flurry of, grand jury subpoenas and all of this, there was kind of there was some clamoring from liberals of you got to charge Trump, but it was relatively quiet. It was not a huge focus of conversation. Now you've really raised expectations that this dude is actually going to be charged. And so, like I said, now they've created a political problem for themselves on the other side if they do decline to charge him. So that's why, I tend to believe at this point that there will be an indictment of some sort coming at some point. But who knows? I'm not a DOJ insider. This is pure speculation, so we will wait and see like everybody else.
That's right.
Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.